Hello folks, and welcome to the show. Myself, Shane Stapleton and Michael Verney. Big weekend coming in the All-Ireland Football Championship, but we're not too far away in terms of the All-Ireland Hurling final as well, and we've got a live show coming up next week, Michael Verney.
We do, yeah. Well, I think Shane was bringing the hard hat with him. We're heading down to Scariff in Clare. Should be a belter of a night. Lots of big guests confirmed. We've the great Cyril Farr, Tommy Guilfoyle, Mike Mack, a son of Scariff, and Barry Murphy, who's actually living down in Cork now, and we'll bring a bit of a Cork flavour to it. He was the one that ended up with the ball in his hand at the end of the famous Jimmy Cooney match, actually in '98 as well. So we've a couple of more guests to be confirmed. Should be an absolute cracker of a night. And actually, listen, the two counties are gone pretty mad, but like Clare are gone mad, but I think Cork is gone particularly bonkers at the minute. And it's funny, I was kind of thinking about the weekend with Galway and Donegal, and obviously Galway beat Dublin and Cork stopped the 5 in a row. But there is some history in sport of teams or individuals that have stopped like the dominant force, not in a final, like beating them in a quarterfinal or semi-final, and not gotten over the line in a final. Like, you just think, I'm throwing you on the spotlight, but off the top of your head, like what teams or players would come to mind across various sports?
Okay, well, Tipperary obviously stopping the drive for 5. What comes to
No, well, they stopped the drive for 5 in the final, so that's completely different. They finished the job.
Okay, Mayo, 4 years in a row, they knocked out the previous year's champions. So it's 2011, 12, 13, and maybe 14, but I can't remember if they were all in the final. I know they beat Cork in 2011 in quarterfinal. 2012 beat Dublin in a semi. 2013 beat Donegal in a quarter, I think. 2014, who got to the final in 14? So it was
they were beaten by Kerry in 14. They were beaten by the eventual champions. Mayo in 2021 is a great one, though. Like, they stopped it's mad to think it was a 7 in a row attempt at the time, and then they didn't finish the job. James O.S. mentions Donegal in 14. Like, the thing about it is, as well, is that the pressure, you're going from Donegal were massive underdogs in 14, and then all of a sudden, I think they were marginal favourites going into the final. Same with Cork. Cork were underdogs the 2 days they played Limerick, and now they're marginal-ish favourites. I think they're around the 8 to 11 mark. But even across other sports, I know you're a big NFL man. Am I right in saying the Buffalo Bills beat the favourites for the Super Bowl 4 years in a row and didn't win it themselves?
Yeah, they lost 4 Super Bowls. Yeah, fairly famously enough. Yeah, that'd be tragic stuff. And then I always think of, oh damn it, what's the name of the team from Roscommon that lost 4?
Clonagale, yeah.
Clonagale. Sorry, it was just escaping me there for a second. But yeah, Clonagale. Come here. All-Ireland Hurling final. It's been announced that Johnny Murphy is going to take charge of the game. Now, he's not the most popular in terms of Clare, if you're to go along the likes of what, for example, Derek Lynch has been posting of Clare FM for the last couple of years. But what do you make of this appointment?
I thought Derek's tweet was today was very non-committal. It was just fact-based, no opinion, and Derek likes to give an opinion, but there was no opinion given. I just commented that there will be a Limerick man involved in the All-Ireland final. Listen, there hasn't been probably too many opportunities for him. This is the first time he could probably do a final since 19. He obviously couldn't do 18 either. He was only on the county scene in 18. Some supporters would be worried that the game will be refereed, shall we say, a fair bit differently than the 2 semi-finals are refereed. I would say particularly the Limerick Cork game, which was Thomas Walsh kind of let things go on, and I don't think there were too many people complaining, to be honest with you. He swallowed the whistle a la John Keenan in the 2022 Munster final, and a la John Keenan in the last year's All-Ireland final. So people would be worried, I'd say. Like, obviously the last big county game he took was, Rory O'Connor was sent off in that game after picking up a yellow card very early. So I just hope there's nothing like that. I hope whoever wins it on merit. And obviously when Clare beat Cork earlier on the year, they beat a 14-man Cork. You just want 15 on 15 going toe-to-toe, and you want a real war, and you want it to be, like, let's call a spade. You want it to be refereed loosely enough, because if you're following the letter of the law, it'll just be a free fest, and that's, like, nobody wants to see that, really.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, he refereed a match at Croke Park between Wexford and Dublin. It was just a free fest. I have in my head it was 42 frees, but
I think 50, Shano. I think
Maybe
50.
it was.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. But I remember at the time, were we there watching it together? Maybe we were
Maybe,
quite
or we chatted about it
frustrated.
after, but Davy cut loose after about it. They were enforcing, I forget what rules they were going after. They haven't been going after them since. Maybe they were going after the hand pass at the time, I don't know. But it was like every type of foul was being pulled, and it was just a terrible game to watch. Like, I'm not expecting that like that in the All-Ireland final. And I do think, and on Richard Hogan's point there, Murphy has improved like I said it about 18 months ago here. I think Willie Barrett had actually been working with him and mentoring him. But like, there's still incidents here and there. Like, remember the Lockmore and Ballygunner game a couple of years ago, where Lockmore finished with 13 men in terrible conditions, and it seemed grossly unfair that day. I think everybody just wants a real sporting final where teams go hell for leather at each other. And listen, we don't want to be talking about refereeing on a Monday. Nobody, I'm sure the referee doesn't want us to be talking about him either. So hopefully he let it flow to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's this idea of give a booking early because it'll sort of lay the marker down to players. And then the idea then would that players would back off a small bit, tone it down. But as we saw at Rory O'Connor, kind of put him in a situation where he then had to send him off. So I would just be thinking, keep the cards in the pocket for the first 5 minutes, let the lads figure each other out, and look, fair enough, if something happens that's a bit over the top, deal with it then. Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4. Shane, what's it like coming up to All-Ireland with your brother Paddy playing? How different is it to a normal supporter? It's absolutely horrible when the game is on, especially, you know, every final was against Kilkenny. Every ball in is 90 yards into the sky, dropping down, and there's, you know, lads who are good in the air up against him. And like, generally he had excellent games in the All-Ireland final, thank God. But it is very, very nervy watching it. Coming up to the final, absolutely fine. But once it starts, oh my God, it's difficult stuff.
I actually didn't know you at the time, but I remember hearing an interview, could have been today FM, I can't remember, it was 2014, maybe coming up to the replayed game, I think. Was it the replayed game where Paddy got the point, or was it the drawn game?
It was the drawn game.
It was the real high scoring game. Yeah. Listen, I can't imagine what it's like. Like, this is not a comparison at all, but I'm obviously involved in a couple of horses or that, and I would take it very personally when anybody would say anything negative about the horse in any way. Like, I'd say that's multiplied by 100 if you have a sibling involved in a big match like that. I can't imagine what it's like.
Okay, well, look, delighted to say we're joined by Michael McMullen now to talk about some of the football coming up this weekend. And just to take up the point we were going through there, Michael, how nervy are you during matches when your own are involved, whether it's just your county or maybe with club, watching family?
Definitely very nervous. My brother Anton was our goalkeeper in Stapleton for a long time. And I remember in the early days when he was playing, you know, you were sort of, anytime the ball landed in the goal mouth, you'd be nervous. You certainly would be. But I suppose as he gets older and a wee bit more experienced, then, you know, you didn't need to worry. But it's definitely an issue. And I even notice it, lads, like I've covered Derry Miners the past few weekends, and their Dublin game, their Kerry game, even their final against Armagh was like edge of the seat moments, you know. And you can see, I think it was after they beat Kerry, I bumped into a couple of the parents on the pitch, and they were as white as a ghost, you know. And you know, their sons had played well, but you can just tell they didn't enjoy it. You know, like Johnny McBride and Adrian McGuckin had young fellas playing, and they would have played quite a high level themselves, but you could just see them, they were just like nervous. You know, you can understand that. It's a very valid point. And then I suppose you've also the case where you've supporters who find it difficult watching their own team. You know, they're just completely invested in it. And thankfully, whenever you're reporting on it, you sort of have to try and dilute it a wee bit, but it's definitely an issue. What's your...
A real quick point. I was manager of our club team, joint manager in 2021 or 2012. We got to the under-21 final, and I actually really struggled to eat all that week. Like, I was that nervous, genuinely. And by the end of the week, I wasn't eating too bad. But one of the lads said it to me after. He said, I wasn't that nervous before the match. He said, and then I saw you in the dressing room, and I was like, holy Christ, this is big. He said, I was pale as a ghost. And he just said that would have filtered down through certain lads. It's gas-like, because even like with parents at home, you have to almost you can't be nervous and exhibit a nervousness to your children right like that after going playing games right like that. But I learned a valuable lesson that basically I need to get my own SH1T in order to make sure that I'm not affecting the players or anything like that, but it was just a bit of a mad one. I can't imagine what it's like for parents, lads. I'd say it is some roller coaster.
But on that point, Michael, like last Saturday, I went into the local barbers in Mahara, and Jack McLeod, the Derry minor goalkeeper, he was cutting hair. And the two defenders in the full back line, Padraig O'Kane and Padraig Harn, he cut both their hair. And there wasn't one mention of football. And I remember saying when I left, all the best tomorrow, lads. And you know, like that was the afternoon before their biggest game of the year. You know, and they were sitting, and you wouldn't have thought it, but as you say, I guarantee you parents would be absolutely up the walls. And did we often hear stories, lads, where managers, when they're nervous, they come into a team meeting, or they get on the bus whistling as if everything's 100%, just to make sure the players think, well, here, the manager's on the money here, so everything's okay.
Yeah, it's all you're portraying an image, because if you're not relaxed, they won't be relaxed. If they see how big it is in your eyes, then you're consciously or unconsciously putting pressure on them. So it's just a unique one. Didn't Anthony Daly come in? Did he come in a pair of Speedos into the dressing room before a big game at Dublin one time, just to try and relax the mood? Like, this is the sort of mad stuff that goes on, boys, that you hear about some of it, you probably don't hear about the best stuff, I'd say.
Definitely not. But sure, it's all about a crack, isn't it?
Exactly.
I know you're currently on holidays, so maybe you haven't been at home to dig too much into the Harte thing, but just Mickey Harte exiting the fray 1 year into a 3-year term, I suppose. Were you shocked?
I probably wasn't shocked, because there seemed to be unrest just about the whole thing, just where the camp wasn't totally united. You're hearing stories about, you know, players wanting a change and things like that, but again, they're only really stories. I haven't heard anything concrete. But like, he was appointed for a 3-year term, and I suppose if you've won the league, it'll look definitely as a very bizarre situation where somebody that has experience is now gone. But it seemed to be that there was discussions behind scenes or whatever, and all of a sudden Mickey's gone. And it sort of happened whenever I'd went away, but I'm not totally surprised. But the thing about it is, no matter who comes in, is it Rory Gallagher, Malik O'Rourke, whoever it happens to be, two things on it I would say, and as I say, I'm away and I'm sort of shut down from the whole thing on purpose, just to chill. But two things: the window is very, very small for this group, because if Brendan Rodgers is 30, you know, he's far from finished, but he's getting that age where you're trying to peak. I think he's been their main player over the last 2 games. So the window is very small for whatever happens. And secondly, whoever takes over as Derry senior manager, in my opinion, needs to just forget about the McKenna Cup. You know, play young fellas in the McKenna Cup, play boys like Dermot Baker to maybe get them that wee bit more experience, and target like the 3rd or 4th league game onwards. But at the same time, there's no point in me contradicting myself. I did feel that the right thing to do for Derry at the time was to go hell for leather. I think I said it on here before, because Derry needed to stay up. But whenever you look at the breakdown of the games this weekend, like, for example, Armagh and Donegal came from Division 2, and it wouldn't be a shock if we both ended up in the All-Ireland final. And look at the Dubs last year. So maybe the Division 1 thing isn't as big a deal. It's probably more for somebody like me in a county where we've been out of it for so long. We sort of think, you know, we maybe placed more value on it because we weren't in it, if you get me. Yeah. So maybe next year, I think, as I say, whoever takes over the ship, that needs to be the focus, and try and see, can you find an Dermot Baker in the club championship somewhere? I think that has to be the focus.
Well, I was reading a bit about that Cara O'Kane was writing, and he said the option of reappointing, this is referring to Rory Gallagher, was explored last year after their exit at the hands of Kerry, but Ulster GA's decision to debar Gallagher from the association without prejudice, in quotes, led to Derry moving on and appointing Hart soon after. That barring order was lifted by the DRA in February this year, and Gallagher is free to coach again. Michael, do you envisage Rory Gallagher coming back in?
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. And I suppose whenever Mickey was appointed last year, that was the end of the surprises for me. But I suppose he has been cleared in so many places as regards taking over the job. Not first hand, but I know second hand that he's definitely the choice of the players from the point of view of what he had brought in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised. But if he is appointed, there definitely would be division. There'll be some people won't be for it, some people will. So it's definitely a tricky few weeks ahead for Derry. But probably when you park everything, I'll go back to my first point, lads. It's a very small window for this group to try and go from, league champions, borderline contenders, to falling away, to getting back on that horse again. It's a very, very small window. I'll just, so it's an important decision to see what way things go now.
As regards the image in the county, Michael, surely Malachy O'Rourke, with all his inter-county experience and all his, he knows the Derry Championship inside out. He knows every player inside out, and he has I'm sure he has the backing of 4 to 5 of the biggest personalities in the Derry dressing room. Surely that's shall we say, the wise choice from across many spheres. I would say that's the wise choice if he's available.
Yeah, that's certainly, Malachy would be a brilliant choice, as you say. He knows every footballer in Derry at the moment and who's up to it and who's not. And then obviously, if Malachy came on board, you'd imagine Ryan Porter would come. He's a heavily respected coach. And then even from the point of view of analysis, maybe some of your listeners don't realise this, but Johnny Bradley, who would have done the stats for RTE, he's a Glen man, and he was doing all the video work for Malachy. So if Malachy was to be the manager, that would be another great addition. The likes of Johnny coming on board. But I think reading between the lines, the timing's going to be wrong for Malachy, because he's going in to defend this Derry title, and he's going to come up against players from Slotmeal, Maher Phelps, all the key clubs. So that will be difficult to do that as the Derry manager, unless Derry push pause on anything until the Derry Championship's over. And then at that stage, Malachy's the manager of the club champions or not, as opposed to the manager of a team that's stuck in the middle of the warfare of trying to get out of a championship.
And Michael McMullen, again, just going to the 2 semi-finals this weekend, there's a couple of brilliant narratives, whether you look at Galway against Donegal with the Jim McGuinness thing and the fact that he came in for a coaching session or a few coaching sessions a few years ago with Pádraig Joyce, who he knows so well from college days, and then obviously the other side, Kieran Donaghy, up against Armagh, having, I suppose in a way won his Footballer of the Year award against Armagh in 2006, and with Jack O'Connor. There's some fascinating plot lines here.
Oh, brilliant. And even I went to UUJ and I was at that Sigerson final where 1998 where Joyce and McGuinness were playing, and it was a brilliant year for football, actually, that era, that the style of play. So it'd be interesting to see what their take would be on it. Did they say they bounced each other a wee text message after the draw or whatever? So it's very, very intriguing. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, lads, there are two counties that haven't met each other that much, the Armagh and Galway scenario. So it's brand new rivalry, and a lot of people are talking about the Jim McGuinness story, about how good that is for Donegal, but Pádraig Joyce's story of they're the most talked about county for injuries. Every time you mention Galway, it was if they get everybody back. And we're probably still talking about that at the moment because they do have a few doubts. But what he did to keep Galway in Division 1, I was touching earlier about Derry needing to win so many league games. The day that Derry beat them in Salt Hill in the league game, Galway were missing maybe half a dozen players that they would count, not even championship men, but key championship men that weren't there. So it's a brilliant narrative for him. And then obviously chinning the Dubs. That's major belief. They have to take so much belief from that. So I'm looking forward to games this weekend. I might be going to the one on Sunday. I need to check if I'm available. We have a club game on in the morning, but I'm looking forward to the games, and I think realistically it's wide open. I really think it is. And you're chatting about narratives. Even the narrative lads, where any of the 4 teams, if they're having a meeting tonight, will realistically think they can win Sam. They realistically can.
Yeah, and it could be so it's the first semi-final, as most people know, for Armagh since 2005. We could be looking at the first will it be the first potentially all Ulster final since 03, which would make it very intriguing as well? Or sorry, was that 05? I mix up some of those
03.
years.
03, yeah.
Okay. But Michael Verney, I mean, which of these two semi-finals grabs you most?
I'd say the Sunday game probably does a bit more. Just partly for what Mike said there about the relationship or friendship between McGuinness and Joyce, and just the fact that listen, I've been totally kind of pulled in by the whole McGuinness return in Donegal and how everything is gone so swimmingly and how he's got everyone back on side, and he wouldn't have planned or maybe thought that he could win an All-Ireland in his first year, but like when it opens up like this, lads, as Mike says there, everybody is thinking that they can win an All-Ireland. Like you know, outside of Galway, the other three teams can win an All-Ireland without beating the Dubs. Like this is it's wide open. You throw a blanket over the four of them. You could pick all the different pairings that you could possibly pick for a final. Like they're all very believable. It's like with the hurling last weekend, we probably thought it was going to be Limerick and Kilkenny. We weren't that surprised with what we got in the wind-up, and we won't be that surprised with what we get come 6 o'clock on Sunday evening. But the one on Sunday, probably a bit more. And it's probably partly to do, Shana, with the point I made earlier. So Galway have taken down the Giants, and with probably little pressure on them going into that game. Now all of a sudden there's a bit of pressure and expectation on them, and they're coming up against a team that are flying high. They scored 123, I think 121 for play in their quarter final. They're coming up against a manager that knows them pretty well and who's been in amongst their camp and knows the way Pádraig Joyce thinks, knows the way he probably sets up. So it's Sunday is the really, really interesting one for me. That's not to say Saturday's not interesting. It's very interesting too, but Sunday is fascinating.
I was reading a piece there with Kieran McKeever. He spoke to the media this week and about Kieran Donaghy and how well he'd know the Kerry players. And he goes, Star brings so many things to the table. He's great to be around, but that's not all. He's also an excellent coach. He's a great head for the game, and obviously leading into this game at the weekend, he knows the Kerry players inside out. Some of them were coming in at the tail end of his career. He was playing club football up to last year, so he's come across these boys in club football. He knows a lot about them, but at the same time, we have to focus in on our own game, trying to get the balance right, trying to execute our game, which is important. Would you say, Michael McMullen, that this probably would be the day when, above all, Kieran Donaghy can make his experience count because of that link with Kerry?
I think so. I think he has to know even the mentality of how they would approach even the Ulster team, and like Armagh are very, very difficult to break down themselves. So he might have an idea about how Kerry would try and go about that. Are Kerry going to do something different than they did against Derry? Because it ended up a borefest just because they were scared of getting hit on the break. So Donaghy has to have that insight into even how Jack would make a decision around selection, because he was probably at that side of it as well in the team meetings. It's definitely a huge factor there. And I'm just, even the fact, this is the other argument, is that like Derry shut down Kerry so well, they put out so many of Kerry's fires. Their problem is that they couldn't light any of their own at the other end. So he'll have an input on how Jack will deal with that. Like, does Jack then decide to go completely different tactically? Like Kieran would have been privy to those conversations no more than his own positioning at full forward. Like he sort of came from nowhere, from the underdogs, to just being like that man up there that nobody could handle. So, and he probably will have watched Kerry more often. He would have saw them in club action, and even the lads like Joe O'Connor from his own club, the Stacks. Even that's that dynamic. So it's an interesting one. And then obviously Jason McGahan, who does the S&C for Kerry, he's a former Armagh minor, would have played in 95 when they won Ulster. Sorry, 94 when they won Ulster. And I think then is it Geezer's mates from Kerry. So there's lots of wee stories floating about there. But I think this is a very winnable game for Armagh. I do believe that, because they did, as I say, they'll take so much from what Derry did. Say Barry McCambridge is able to handle Sean O'Shea and like Aaron McKay, if he's the man to, like, he's been annoying forwards all year. He's been impossible to shake off. If he's able to do that to David Clifford, it probably comes down to, how they would handle Kerry the other way, because I think one of the mistakes Derry made was they had Lachlan Murray running after Thomas Sullivan for the best part of the game. So I think makes of Armagh might have to put somebody like Joe McElroy on him, so they're not using an out-and-out score to chase Thomas Sullivan. So I think this is a very winnable game for Armagh. But at the same time, it always is. It also is for Kerry. But I just think that Armagh will have a wee bit more variation and depth that Derry didn't have. Like, I've only counted up 3 of these stats here, lads. I'm going to do the rest and hopefully for a piece when I get back after holidays. But like, Derry scored 21 points from their subs bench this year across their 18 games. Armagh have scored 129. Donegal have scored 332. Like, those are high figures coming in off the bench. You have to ask yourself, like, if what has Jack got up his sleeve? Because they maybe it's an awful thing to say, a county that's got so many, it's got such a steep history in GA. But like, Stephen O'Brien was their man last year. You know, does he go down the line this year from a Kerry point of view, lads? Does he start Adrian Spillane and having Tony Brosnan as a man to come on? Because they didn't have an, you know, it was probably Killian Murphy. Yeah, Killian Burke. He came on. He was probably the man who pushed Derry over the cliff. But they're not scorers. So, you know, Armagh have a much more potent balance than Derry had. But then you also have to give Kerry the respect that they're sitting in that long grass that they're so used to sitting in and just coming out whenever they need to. We've seen it so many times. So they're definitely contenders as well. But I just think I wouldn't write off Armagh too quickly, and I would give them every chance of getting to the final.
Killian Spillane might be the one lad to buck that trend, would he?
Aye, very much so, yeah. Like, he kicked that point, and when I put them 2 points up, and like, he had a decent impact against, was it Galway in the final a few years ago? So, but they just maybe don't have the bench that the Dubs had, and maybe the Dubs fell into the trap of starting too many of their main men, you know, and we're not going to get into that now, but so you just maybe find that even from Donegal, which you'll probably come to that game a wee bit later, even Donegal having Conor O'Donnell there, so it does come down to the bench, and I think that Armagh and Donegal have as much about them in the bench as anybody else.
Michael Verney, I saw a very good stat from Frank Roach. He said, since losing to Donegal in April 2022, Armagh have only lost one of their next 18 football championship contests in regulation time, and that was against Armagh in a 2023 group game. Over 70 minutes, they've been virtually unbeatable. So that is what Kerry are going to come up against.
Yeah, who is the team that beat them, Shane?
Tyrone in a group game in 2023.
Okay, yeah, it's a fair record. I'm sure. Listen, the whole penalties thing is a heartbreaker because, as I said to you, someone wins on the day, but someone wins, but someone doesn't really lose. They're just out of the championship. You've never really lost. You've just missed a penalty or had a penalty saved. So they have a fair old record, and like this, it is a like Kerry are formidable opposition, obviously, but what a chance to get to a final. They earned that, I suppose, with the quarter final draw they got. They earned maybe a softer side than maybe some other teams had. And it's just a matter of trying to push over the line now. Whether they can do it or not, I don't know. I'm like you, Shane. I'm not convinced by Kerry and probably haven't been convinced by them since the All-Ireland final in 22. I don't think they're as clinical at the back as they were then. I don't think they're probably as clinical up top as they were then. So opportunity knocks for Armagh, but surely there's a bit of a performance brewing in Kerry as well, you'd imagine. And surely there's a performance brewing in Clifford, who's been really quiet by his standards this year. And of course, it was the semi-final last year where he basically got his Footballer of the Year award with an absolutely unbelievable performance against Derry. So you will be expecting kind of big things from him as well. And the links, you mentioned the links are fascinating. I think is it Colin Traynor that does the stats for Kerry? I think he's an Armagh man originally as well.
He is, yeah.
So he is. So you have the Star one end, and you have Jason McGann, who's obviously employed by Kerry GA, I think, and you have Colin Traynor as well, and you have Geezer's wife thrown into the mix. So there's plenty of links. There's plenty of links between the two, and it's going to make it very interesting. You have the 2002 link, and then remember in 06, weren't sure Kerry looked in disarray going into that. Was that quarter final where basically the kind of Donaghy announced himself that 2006 quarter final, I think, and I think Armagh actually were favourites going into that game, and because Kerry had sleepwalked through the qualifiers that year, and Tomas and Gooch were dropped, I think, the same year, and it didn't look like they were going to didn't look like they were going to get to that sort of position, but they turned it around in that quarter final. So I think that was Kieran McGeeney's last game in Croke Park as well, or maybe his last game for Armagh, I think. So listen, there's a hell of a lot on the line for the two of them, but particularly for Armagh, you're not going to get a better chance probably of getting into a final. And this team has been in around that area for a while, so they need to grab this opportunity with both hands.
And Michael McMullen, a final point in this game before we look for, I suppose, predictions. If you look at what Armagh will try to do this weekend, if I was them, I'd be looking to rough up Kerry a little bit. I'm not saying go way over the line, but, physically impose ourselves, little nudges after the ball is gone, whatever it might be. And I look at the forward line Kerry have the last day. Tony Brosnan, Paddy Clifford, Darragh Moynihan, David Clifford, Sean O'Shea, Paul Ganey. Now, I'm not saying they're pushovers, but I'm certainly not thinking that they could physically impose themselves overly on Armagh, that there might be a chance for Armagh to, to sort of glower over them a little bit.
I think they have to. And like, there's this perception out here that Kerry don't mix it. Like last year, like 2 or 3 players got stuck into Shane McGuigan. And like, that's fair game. That's what you do in a championship game. So it's just always disappointing to hear that it's always the Northerners that are always getting stuck in. So I think Armagh have to do that. They definitely do. And likewise, what Kerry did last year to Shane McGuigan, they're 100% right as well. It's championship football. You have to. You're spot on, Shane. I think they have to come with something like this. They definitely do. And it's limiting that ball going on to David Clifford. Really, that's what it comes down to. Like, Derry stopped it completely stopped it. And if they can occupy Tadhg Morley, like, that's the other thing that they need to do. They need to make sure whoever plays at number 11 is that somebody who's going to, like, take Tadhg Morley out of his comfort zone. Like, he loves to sit back. Like, that year they got to the All-Ireland final and won it. I think the only 2 goals Kerry conceded that year, he was the boy who was back on the line blocking them. He was just, I think it was Monaghan up in Skeen and Dublin in the final, I think, with the 2 goals. So that's they have to make sure that he's not sitting back. So that's where maybe, Rian O'Neill, put him at number 11, a bit like Kieran McFall did last year. I'm at number 11 here, Tadhg. You're going to have to mark me, because my team's going to give me the ball and you're going to have to mark me. Because if you look at the first 3 plays of the Armagh and Roscommon game, now I was only watching it on TV, so you're only following the camera, but it was 3 real early balls. And I remember thinking to myself, Armagh looked like a team just kitted out for Croke Park. And then they stopped doing it. But maybe when you're at the ground, maybe Roscommon started to drop a bit deeper. Maybe that was the case. But as somebody watching at home, and those first 3 attacks, they were direct ball, and I was thinking, this is exactly what Armagh need to be getting ready for. And I'm sure if they did that to Kerry, that would have Kerry asking a bit more about themselves, to be honest. So Rian O'Neill's positioning at centre forward could be as big a, not his positioning, but how he imposes himself or not could be the biggest thing about the whole game.
It's funny, just on the point you made there, Mike, Kieran McGeeney was interviewed by Tomás O'Shea last year, and despite what the perception is, he said that Kerry team were by far and away the toughest team they ever played, and everybody would think it would be Tyrone or it would be, Armagh would be labelled the toughest. So it's like that thing of, if you have a reputation of getting up early in the morning, you can stay in bed till 10 o'clock, or if you have a reputation of not being down the pub having a pint, you can go down and have 10 and no one will say a word to you. But Kerry do seem to, Kerry mix it, lads, the good Kerry teams and any All-Irelands they've won, they've been as miserable and as ignorant as any team in the history. It's just they seem to get away with it maybe a bit more because of the image. I don't know if it's an image that they've created for themselves or what, but they definitely get away, when they do stuff, they get away with it maybe more so than some other teams, particularly looking up into the northern half of the country.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with them mixing it. In fact, I love that. You love watching that. But it's just always disappointing that they're made out to be whiter than white. And if they mix it, fair play to them. That's what it's about. That's why people go to games. That's why people stop going to games, because there's not enough of it. So it's definitely a part for it, but it's just maybe the way it's commented on sometimes. But we'll change the record before I.
And Michael, then actually, while we're talking about Armagh and moving on to another game, like Down came very close to beating Armagh and Ulster, and they're in the Tailteann Cup final against Laois this weekend. Surely it's their time.
I think it has to be. And if they're not thinking that way, there's something badly wrong. But I know they are. They were bitterly disappointed they didn't do it last year. And even the league final against Westmeath, when they couldn't create a goal, they were really disappointed about that. So it is their time. I think Down's biggest problem, just as a county, they just don't have any size. They don't, they need two Oran Murdocks, one as a target man, one at midfield. But that's if he like Laverty has used so many players, he's delved into nearly every corner of the county looking for men all through the campaign, but the size just doesn't seem to be there. But they do need like Ulster needs Down back challenging again, and Saturday is that time whenever they can get back into Sam Maguire. I do fancy them. I fancied them last year, and sort of my perception of Laois is they're so inconsistent. I think anytime I'm doing predictions and they predict Laois, they always seem to lose. Maybe I'm just bad at making predictions, but it always seems to be Laois. They seem to be just impossible to predict. And then they put in, I actually fancy that Antrim to beat them, and Antrim was in a decent spot for a good while. But I'm gonna give Down the nod here, and hopefully they do. And Kieran Mina, who obviously was in coaching with Derry, would have been you're chatting about who takes over from Derry. I'd love to see him back involved with Derry. He's excellent. So he's made a good impact into Down. So I would like to see them to get that title, and I think they will.
Mike, you mentioned about Down. They mightn't have unbelievable size, but they must be one of the fastest teams in the country. They have
unbelievable
everywhere.
Yeah, Shailen Johnson probably sums it up more than anybody. The others like Micheál Rooney and Liam Kerr and even Keelan Mooney would have explosive pace, so they have that. And maybe they're probably nearly like a mirror image of Laverty himself. Like, he was small and evasive and brave and all those things. Where they probably nearly are as I say, they're probably like a shadow of that, or sorry, like a mirror image of that. So I think Down probably need to win this, because if they go 2 years without winning it, then you start to ask questions. Because, like you hit the nail on the head, if they had maybe just one more potent forward that day, they would have maybe taken Armagh. But again, it was Armagh's impact on the bench that made the difference that maybe Down didn't have. So no, I'm going for Down for this one, and hopefully we can get the job done.
Just a quick one, Shane. Nice little element of revenge here as well. Like, it's the same team that hit Laois for 8 goals in Croke Park 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, they will not need any motivation. They've already wrote a couple of wrongs. They won the Division 4 final in Croke Park. They had a good win last day against Antrim. That game looked like it was going away from them big time, and they dogged it out. So they will not be wanting for motivation. They'll also feel like they have a far more defensively kind of solid setup this year maybe than they had last year. That was a bit of a freak game anyway. Like, they could play another 10 times and they wouldn't concede maybe 8 goals across the 10 games. But they won't be lacking for motivation anyway.
And does that reveal the point we always say that sometimes the chip on the shoulder is the best ingredient you can ever have?
I
chip on the
say,
shoulder.
Mike, if you have a chip on both shoulders, it's even better. You're balanced.
Michael McMullen, just finally before we let you go, you've been great with your time, and I know you're on holidays there, so we'll let you get back to it. But where do you think the Donegal against Galway game will be won and lost, or is there any matchup that you're particularly intrigued by?
Well, probably more generally in that game, I'd have to say, I hear a lot of people talking about it might be a year too early for Jim. Next year never comes. If this is their year, why not go for it? I think they're marginally my favourites to win the All-Ireland. Just probably, and it's probably no slight on. That's a very open All-Ireland at that, but I just like what they're doing. I just like everything about them. It's just their whole. Everybody just attacks. They just seem to have loads of variation, and it makes them very difficult to tie down. The problem will be this weekend is that Galway's size, like the size Galway have, around the middle. I'm not sure of the status of Jason McGee, to be honest with you. Been off work. I haven't really been asking, but
McGuinness reckoned, Michael, that he had an ongoing knock that was affecting him, that he couldn't get up to a level, and he said they pulled stumps and basically got him rehabbing, and he said he'd be good to go for the semi-final. What level he's at or that, but it's an interesting one that they obviously thought, and they've seen it. You see lads in club games or whatever, and you're playing week on week, and it just takes its toll. And if you're able to pull back for a couple of weeks, you're buying yourself a couple of weeks of rehab and you might be able to get back into the fold if you're still in the championship. But he's like on form. Earlier in the year, he was one of the best midfielders in the country, so he'd be a fair lad to have. He'd be a fair tool to add back into your box, and put it that way.
Yeah, and the other thing is he had very little football played before they met Derry in the Ulster Championship, and he was, borderline star man that day. So if Jim has a role for him that doesn't involve a load of running up and down the pitch, maybe he's the man to go toe-to-toe with Conroy and make sure he doesn't boss the game, and that might just suit him, that might suit that role, Michael. Now that you say that, but where's it won or lost?
I could be wrong in saying that, Michael, but I think was his first appearance of the year in the Division 2 final, league final. I think one of his first, anyway.
It was one of his first. He may have played a few minutes earlier on in the league, but that was his first sort of. Him and Niall O'Donnell the same. I think probably the key factor for Donegal is that they've just got so many attacking options from everywhere, and it's just the Jim factor. He will have them so tuned in to the fact that there's 4 teams left in this race, and that why not? He'll be saying to them, lads, why not us? But the other side of it is Galway have been very, very hard to beat. Like they haven't, they just haven't been beaten. They were very, very unlucky not to finish top of the group through that. Was it down in Sligo they played, and the kicker went astray on them. They did very well at top of the group. So it's probably a tighter one to call here, but I give Donegal every chance.
Well, look, Michael, really appreciate you joining us. And just for anyone who doesn't know, Michael has written Derry Game of My Life, so that's an ideal thing to pick up, and also writes for Gaelic Life. So, Michael, really, really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll chat to you in the not-too-distant future.
Okay, maybe see you Sunday, lads.
Yeah, I'll be in there anyway. Good luck, Michael. Will you be in Croker this weekend?
Yeah, in Sunday, yeah. Looking forward to it. I kick back and watch the game at home on Saturday, but looking forward to the game on Sunday, yeah. Big time. Sure, listen, it's all starting to heat up, and it's just opportunity for, like, call your All-Ireland winners. You couldn't call them too confidently, I'll put it to you that way.
Not a clue. And I was reading, like, Gary O'Donnell was talking to the media this week, former Galway player, and he was saying about the match with Donegal. From a neutral point of view, I'd say a lot of people would say it's a 50-50 game. I give Galway a great chance going into the Dublin game. I was fairly confident that it would go down the home straight, which it did. It'll be the same thing on Sunday. We alluded to subs, and they'll have a huge part to play in it. I think there's a slightly conflicting style of play of both teams. Galway are very structured in defence and attack. Donegal are organised at the back, but you hit on the counter. They have a lot of legs, a lot of runners, a lot of pace. I expect both teams to put on a good show. I think it'll be somewhat high scoring based on what you've seen of previous games, and a bit of an arm wrestle up to the last quarter where one team will probably push on ahead of the other and see it home. Hopefully that'll be Galway. I really can't call this game at all.
Yeah, Galway have been really defensively solid. Like, what they're conceding is like 16 points conceded to Dublin. That's a very, very healthy tally to be conceding in an All-Ireland semi-final. They've been very, very hard to break down. And you have a Donegal team that, when the opportunity arises, seem to play pretty free-flowing football. So I don't know. I don't think it'll be as free-flowing maybe as we saw in the quarter-final. Their conversion rate was through the roof in the quarter-final as well. It was ridiculous conversion rate. So I think Gary's probably right. It'll probably marry somewhere in the middle of small bit. It definitely won't be totally open, but it won't be real defensive or anything either. I think it'll be a nice little mix of the two.
Did you see some of that interview that Aidan O'Shea did this week?
Yeah, I just saw the quotes actually. Didn't see the interview, I just saw the quotes, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just read out some of it. And, some of this was in the wake of Pat Holmes and Noel Keneally, I suppose, leaving their post at the end of the 2015 season. And there was plenty of mail that went Aidan O'Shea's way. And he said, I didn't read them all. I just didn't. Maybe I'll read them in the future. I'm sure my mother has them cut out and on the bad list. There was a week long of stuff, but it's not really what those people were saying. It's more of all of a sudden what it's okay for everyone else to say. So basically, when you're getting stuff in through your post box at home, into your family home, that is just scandalous in my opinion. Handwritten letters, typed letters, personal stuff about you, what you should do. It's quite delicate stuff. That stuff is very difficult. And I know Dad has gone to higher powers to see if he could do something about it. It's very hard to trace this stuff, and that can be quite difficult. Nameless stuff, or the same person probably in different names. So that's very hard, to the point where my mother would have intercepted it at home. And when I moved into my house in town, my fiance would now intercept it. He said it hasn't happened in the last while, at least. So that's something. But I wonder how many players are dealing with that stuff. Like, he is a lightning rod for criticism anytime anything happens with Mayo. You know, he just seems to attract it for whatever variety of reasons, and he's kind of half speculated on himself that Mayo were getting so close for so long, and he's obviously a main player within the team that he ends up being criticised for. What do you think comes out of it? Is it like you do a number of sponsorship deals, or you're in the media a couple of times over the years and people think, okay, you're fair game now because you're putting in for it?
Yeah, that's ridiculous as well, though. Like, it's just, I think it's a lot. It's probably a combination of factors. A lot of it comes back to because he's so big. Genuinely, he's so big that people expect him just to take over a big game or win an All-Ireland final almost by himself. It doesn't work like that. Probably part that plays into it as well is that his best games have probably not been in All-Ireland finals, and wasn't it that Pair Mobile sponsorship a couple of years ago, and it came out at a really bad time, and it was like the Baywatch picture almost of him running across the beach, and it came out at a really inopportune time. But he doesn't do that much media. Like, I've always found him very agreeable to do anything even after a match or anything like that generally, and people see that as, oh, he loves the media. Like, they do the media because we ask them to, or you're asking them to dig out of a hole and promote a game or promote something like. But I don't think he's going running doing stuff. He obviously he's done a couple of things since Mayo were knocked out of championship, and I'm sure he'll do a couple of All-Ireland preview nights. But he's in demand in that regard. People want to hear what he has to say. But the idea, like, there's a line, Shano, and like stuff coming in through your door like that and coming to your home is, you're out in a football pitch and you're doing whatever and people are shouting bits and pieces at you. That's I take that fair enough. I'd even think it's not fair enough, but you go down, it probably shouldn't be happening, but you're out in the pitch, so you'll take it. There's a man now, Paul Galvin, who has received a few bits. We're just talking about criticism, Paul, that players have got, and Aidan O'Shea in particular. I'd say great to have you on, number one, but I'd say he's gone again, is he?
You got rid of him.
I didn't anyway. But just like, I think, like, once it goes into your house, that's no longer fair. That's no longer fair game. Like, I've had things said to me in pubs and stuff like that, and I always remember because I'm sober, and I still think that's not too bad. But once it comes into your letterbox or something like that, that's a whole other side of the line completely. Remember chatting in 18 before the All-Ireland final, Michael Donaghy had got loads of poison pen letters. John Kiley had gotten loads of poison pen letters, which I find hilarious now, considering what he went on to achieve and be, the most successful manager by a country mile in their county's history. But people seem to think once you go between the white lines, that you're fair game for any sort of criticism, which, the criticism he talks about there and letters and hate mail and stuff like that, that's too far. That's so far the other side of the line.
How you doing, Paul? Can you hear us okay?
I think your volume might be down, Paul. I can ever so slightly hear you. No,
you can't hear us, Paul.
No, it doesn't look like it, unfortunately. If you boot yourself out, Paul, and maybe come back in again, maybe it might work.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll get that run. It'd be great to get Paul's thoughts heading into the All-Ireland semi-finals. But I was going to say, like, for example, you might see Cian Lynch doing videos and they might be TikTok dances and all this kind of stuff, and there doesn't seem to be any issue. Whereas, for example, Aidan O'Shea, probably because they haven't won the All-Ireland, he gets slated over it. It seems to me that if you're a winner or if you get that All-Ireland title, you can do whatever you like.
Yeah, winners like the script in a lot of things. Do you know what I mean? And as I say, because the Limerick lads have the All-Irelands in the bank, you can kind of do what you want or wear what you want. Like, I hazard a guess and say that if Aidan O'Shea wore some of the things that Cian Lynch was wearing, he would be a lightning rod for further criticism. But because Cian has been maybe more successful in terms of medals in the bank, he kind of gets away with it, and everyone kind of just like, oh, that's the way he is or whatever. But it's a lot of it is to do with, Mayo's famine going on and on and on. But like, I would say, like, Aidan O'Shea is probably one of the most underappreciated players in the history of the GAA. Genuinely, like, I just think, like, I've seen the amount of times I've seen him, particularly outside of Croke Park, like, dominating games. And he dominated the Dublin game this year. Like, that was one of his best games he probably played for Mayo. And I think most people were fairly surprised when he went off, when he's taken off even in the dying minutes of a couple of games in this year's championship. But yeah, I take criticism from people who have put themselves out there into that sphere on the pitch, and I'd say you would too. Like if a former coach or player or someone like that says something to you or they criticise you a bit, you know, you take it. But if someone who's sitting at home eating their tacos or something like that and has never actually put themselves out there, tacos was a funny one. I was trying to think of something that, you know, something modern day that people are having now, but I'd be far more reluctant to take criticism from those types of people, the hurlers on the ditch, shall we say.
Yeah, and speaking of the hurling, hopefully Paul can click back in there. But just we're we're 9 days out from the All Ireland final. So we've had a long season. In terms of narrowing down the hurler of the year at the moment, we're looking at who? Shane O'Donnell. We're looking at Rob Downey, was suggested by John Myler the other day. I suppose we're looking at the sentimental one would probably be Patrick Horgan in the mix there. And who else would you think we're looking at? Darragh Fitzgibbon might be in the shortlist also.
Darragh Fitzgibbon is very short, I believe. I think it's Shane O'Donnell even money, Darragh Fitzgibbon 5-2, and I think Shane Barrett is next best in the betting, I think. Barrett's been unbelievable from what I can see in every championship game this year, or he's been very good in every championship game. Like he was probably their best player. It's probably him and Alan Connolly were two of their best players in the defeat against Waterford. He's been unbelievably consistent this year. He's one of the top scorers from play this year as well. Unless Horgan shoots the lights out in the final, I can't see that. But maybe you think he pull at the heartstrings maybe a bit more than maybe others. But I think Canning would deserve to be in the mix in 17. Not saying he was hurler of the year, but he deserved to be in the mix. At the minute, I wouldn't have Hoggy in the mix, but he could definitely play himself into the mix.
Let's say Alan Connolly got a hat-trick. He'd be in the mix there as well. Let's say Brian Hayes had a big game as well after being man of the match in the All-Ireland semi-final. He wouldn't be shocked if either of them got it. I feel it's totally wide open.
It is wide open, yeah. A lot of it's going to come down to who wins it as well. Like if Brian Hayes hits 1-4 in the final, like that could be that. That would be 1-4. You know, it would be a big tally in an All-Ireland final. It would be man of the match in a semi-final. He was brilliant even against Offaly that day. He was brilliant against Limerick the day down in the park. Probably was quiet the first day against Waterford. I think he was decent against Clare. But a lot will depend on the final. There's a lot of lads very close. Like if Patrick Collins has a big final again and pulls off some saves and dictates affairs and puckouts, won't be a million miles away. If Rob Downey is as dominant as he's been the last couple of games at centre back, he won't be a million miles away as well. And listen, you couldn't rule out the fact as well that the game could end up going to a replay and someone completely different plays themselves into the mix, potentially. Someone who could be, 66, 50 to 1 or something at the minute, has a right good drawn final and then has an unbelievable replay or something like that. So it can change very, very quickly.
I see a few people talking about the different odds, and Downey being 50 to 1, Connolly was 9 to 1, which, some of the young players this year that would have excelled. You'd have to say Adam Hogan. Mark Rogers has obviously been really, really good. Kieran Joyce, and I know it's not his first season with Cork, he's also been good. If you go underage tournaments, then maybe you'd say Adam Screeney, I suppose. There's probably been plenty of others that I haven't even mentioned there. But is there anyone that kind of you're thinking, right, here's a young lad who's really stepped up this season?
Yeah, Conor Lean is someone who, to me, has come completely from left field, I have to say. I wouldn't have really been that aware of him before this year. He's probably in the mix for an All-Star, I'd say, at this stage. He could play his way into an All-Star. Mm-hmm. So he would definitely be one. Just, you mentioned the Offaly 20s there. I'd have Brecon Kavanagh, I think, is one of the best up-and-coming players. Dan Burke as well, too. Obviously, you've Darren McCarthy from a Tipperary point of view as well. Really, really exciting player. Like that point he got to win the Munster final was out of this world. There's plenty of young up and coming talent coming. Like here, minors, you could pick out any one of 5 or 6 guys in there, and even from a Kilkenny point of view, the likes of Jake Mullen and a few other, like plenty of guys that are underage again next year as well. So there's lots of good talent out there. I think as regards young lads that might end up getting All-Stars, Adam Hogan is like still of third level college age. He's probably firmly in pole position to pick up an All-Star at the minute. If he does a job on someone in the final, he'd probably cement his place. Conor Lean would be another. Kieran Joyce has a big final and keep somebody else quiet like he did to Hegarty in the All-Ireland semi-final. He won't be a million miles away from it. And I say Brian Hayes has been just unbelievable so far. And it's interesting to see some of the young lads will deal with the pressure of an All-Ireland final very well. Others not so much. Some will soar, some will maybe get lost in the occasion as well. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, Martin Furlong says Sean O'Brien from Wexford is a top prospect from minor, top scorer in the minor championship. Very pacey, Kitog, full forward. I've seen play this year, really good. Adam English as well. Like any other county, he'd probably be the star man by now.
Yeah, 100%. And he came on and put one wide to the far side, and the next couple of balls he recycled the last day, and then he put over, a lovely score there at the end of it. Aidan O'Connor obviously was off target with his chance, but obviously a very good player too. Shane O'Brien, a very good player. Fergal O'Connor was probably thrown in the deep end at different stages this year, but he'd be hoping and sure he's going to try and nail down a place over the coming years as well. So, like, all the narrative is kind of about Limerick's age. Like, it's not as if there's not like a good handful of lads coming. Are they as good as what they're replacing? Maybe not at the minute, but there's the potential for them to be, and they've been exposed to that kind of real elite level. I suppose the big question is, Shane, we saw it there, John Kiley's taking a career break from his job, and you're just wondering, will he be there? Will he be there next year? And will all his kind of coaching staff be there next year? That's good. That'll play a lot into what your thoughts are on Limerick for 2025 and what mine are as well, because you know exactly what you're going to get out of the current squad under Kiley. You wouldn't be 100% sure what you're going to get under somebody else. And is there an obvious successor then as well? Is another kind of question to it too.
If Kinnerk and Kiley both weren't there next year, I'd still say Limerick have the best collection of players, but I wouldn't necessarily make them favourites for the All-Ireland as I currently would if that management team remains.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. You get, I'm not having any slight on whoever, if somebody does come in, you always get, it's like a residual effect of the previous regime. It can stay going maybe for a year. It's in the second year maybe where if the new ideas aren't maybe flowing as well as the previous ones, you can kind of get caught out. And I think we've all seen that with various management changes kind of down through the years, but I would definitely have them firmly in the mix. Would Kiley return without Kinnerk? I would guess and say he probably wouldn't, I'd say. So it's going to be interesting. I thought they all might finish if they'd done 5 in a row, and you're leaving on top as Jim Gavin and his kind of management team did. But now, like, if he was thinking of going, now all of a sudden it's like I'm sure players would be, if he was leaving, would be tugging at his heartstrings and saying, you cannot leave now. Like, we've been on a high for so long. You have to be with us where we try and get back on top of the mountain again. And I'm sure that would be very hard to turn down as well. But so there's going to be lots of interesting conversation. I don't think Kiley be making any snap judgment anyway. It's not his style. Even when he was getting announced that he was staying on, it was a Brian Cody job where he took like 2 or 3 months until he actually decided. I don't think you're going to hear that in the next couple of days or anything like that. I think they'll take time. And you don't know what sort of hunger will be kind of in you to see the All-Ireland final from a different position this year. I'd say that would tell a lot for those lads and their emotions, and depending on who wins it as well. Because if Cork win it, it's like, okay, they took us down. Everyone's billing them as the new team on the block now. We're coming back for a crack at Cork. If it's Clare, it's like, lads, we've beaten Clare the last 3 months for finals. Like, we know we have to keep the train on tracks here. We have to go back, keep the band together and try and dethrone them next year. Plus, they'll be listening to them. Like, no matter who wins, they're going to be listening to them because they're on both bordering both counties. So that might play into it as well.
Yeah, and I just think it's brilliant, and most people think this, that it's not, we're going to have a new champion, and a new champion that hasn't won it for quite so long, quite a long time. So Clare 11 years and 19 years since Cork last won it. So I would actually think for the football as well, it would be brilliant if Kerry didn't make the final, and that's nothing against Kerry per se, but just the excitement levels would be through the roof if it was Armagh, Donegal, or Galway.
It's just that with the hurling, like, no disrespect to the two teams that were beaten in semi-finals, what a novelty factor there is going into the final. There's all new stories, new faces. Like, people probably, from our point of view as journalists, like you get to really go in depth on the characters involved, and you get a 2-week kind of build up to an All-Ireland final. If you had more, it would be better. But profiles of different players, profiles of Brian Lowe, and you're finding out things that you didn't know already because it's so bang, bang, bang the whole way through the year. Lucas Kersenstein, the S&C, he has the chance to, I'd imagine, become one of the first to win All-Irelands with 3 different counties if Clare do win. Like, I'd love commenting if someone else has done it. Just thinking 3 counties, very, very hard to do that. So, like, there's loads of interesting kind of strands to it like that.
Yeah, Kieran O'Neill has done it, I mean, in a different guise. He did it with Tipperary. I don't know the exact role, but it was kind of like athletics.
S&C, yeah, kind of S&C, yeah.
And then involved with Kerry in 2014. And if he does it, that'd be 3 different counties, albeit with different roles. You know, Sean Curtin says, lads, all this talk about Limerick next year, they weren't caught out in a one-off. They were beaten twice by a better team. They have very little coming through that they didn't have this year. But I suppose the few that they do have coming, we saw them take that next step this year. So now next year, if every game you had Adam English starting, you wouldn't feel like the team has weakened, would you?
No, like they all got way more time this year than they did in any previous year. It was way more bit part in previous years. You felt like they were a really important cog in the wheel coming on in games, or even starting in league games or whatever, where it was kind of infrequent appearances before then. They don't have to have like a huge amount coming through necessarily for next year. It's just all those faces, and maybe even the likes of a Colin Coughlin that we didn't see much of, obviously, in the championship, and Donegal that we didn't see much in towards the latter stages of the championship. You also have, like, you'd be hoping anyway, a fully fit Peter Casey, a fully fit Darragh O'Donovan, a fully fit Sean Finn next year. Like, that could be a whole different proposition. That's a really interesting thing as well going into next year. Like, they should be re-energized. They're all going back to their clubs now, obviously, as well. They'll have a break, I'm sure. But it's a different dynamic going back when you're the challenger. They'll be back then. Would they be back earlier than there's been any year since 2019, I'd say?
Probably. And I suppose if you were a county manager, and you could say the same about whoever takes over with Derry, you'd be hoping that whoever the county champions are, if you're to be selfish about the county team, don't get too far.
Well, you like, if you want to put your print on it, you want them all as early as possible for as long as possible. Now, you could also see the benefits in, let's say, like, for long term for Derry of Glen winning an All-Ireland. Like, that should give them a good long-term bounce. But did it probably affect Mickey Harte to some respect? Maybe it did. Maybe it did have an effect in rushing them back in then as well, where they should have probably been given more time. But if you're a manager, like, contact time is huge. Like, that's where you set and play how you know, your style of play. It's how you build I don't like to use the word, but how you build a culture within a squad or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And that type, and set kind of ground rules and set kind of boundaries or whatever. So, listen, we're talking about Limerick there. I like, how would you call it? Is it 50-50 whether Kylie comes back next year, or how would you see it?
I can imagine he will come back again, just to probably leave on a winning note. I would imagine he would want that. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he wasn't back.
If he were to walk away, he would surely be one of the first managers in the history of any sport to have that clean record that he has in finals. That's 16-0. Like, no one, like, he still hasn't been beaten in a final. Like, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, I mean, great. He was involved though in the Limerick panel in the 90s. So as a player, maybe it's not
okay. That's a little bit different.
We'll take the gloss off it somewhere if we can. Unfortunately, Paul Galvin isn't able to sign in there. So look, it was obviously didn't work out this time. It'd be great to have him again in the future. But just your predictions then for the weekend. I'll give you mine then.
It's very, very difficult to call. I'd probably say a Donegal Kerry final, but just about on both fronts. I'm sticking with Donegal, but like, there is that nagging thing, and it's the same probably with the Cork Hurlers. Like, maybe I'm not going to believe it with Galway until they go and do it. The potential is all there, and they could really frank the form at the weekend. But yeah, I'm going to go for Donegal and Kerry. And the Kerry vote is a very, very, very hesitant one, because again, I'm not 100% sure where they are this year.
I'm going to go with Galway Armagh. I know it's basically the exact opposite of what you were saying. I just think that Armagh, for so long, I keep looking at their quality. I'm like, why aren't they getting over the line here? feels like they're finally getting it together this year. And I know they beat Roscommon in the quarterfinal. It wasn't like Galway who beat Dublin in the quarterfinal, but I just kind of have a fancy for them. You know that my belief in Kerry is sort of up and down at best at times over the last couple of years. So, look, I wouldn't be shocked if either game went either way, but that's the way I'd fall with these ones.
Armagh and Galway colliding again in our final, and I don't have to go to a replay, but Armagh somehow winning on penalties in a replay or something like that.
Bit of justice to that. I mean, that penalty shootout that they were in a couple of years ago at Croke Park, and I was at it. Were you at that as well? It was
no, I wasn't at that game. No,
the atmosphere was out of this world. PWL 74. Where will Ben O'Connor go after leaving Cork under 20s? Waterford?
Funny actually. I was chatting to Ben yesterday. And from what he said, it was obviously a bit on and off the record, but I think he's fairly keen to take a break, I think, at the minute, and was just kind of talking about how even the under 20 job is pretty kind of all consuming. So I don't think he'd be doing that. I'd be surprised. He might maybe win a club in 2025, but I don't think he'd be going for a county job or anything like that from what I can gather anyway.
Okay, well, look, that's it for the show this week. We'll be back again on Monday. Keane Johnson will be joining us for that to review the football. Michael, have a good weekend. We'll chat to you later on.